the fluffing that they were doing, we saw this recently in the last couple of weeks, where we had like we sometimes have a broad panel where it's like early 20s all the way up to like late 30s, even 40s. We've had a couple of 50-year-olds, 50 plus, and it's like there'll be a 41-year-old on, and there's a couple of younger gals on, and they'll say something immediately like, because when we go around at the intro, it's, how old are you? Why'd you come on the show? Where do you live? Sort of thing. There's a quick intro. And then like right away, oh my God, you're so beautiful. I would have guessed that you were, 28 years old and not 42. So it's like, come on. Like, can we stop playing the games and have an honest conversation rather than telling somebody that's clearly looking like they're in their 40s that they're, 28 or 29 or something like that. And I think that, the honesty, I mean, a lot more honesty would go a long way, but I don't think that you're ever going to get it from, from the gals. They're always going to fluff each other up. I mean, that's why you have this newfound culture of the fat acceptance movement, right? Where it's like, people that are like categorically unhealthy. They probably have cardiovascular disease, maybe diabetes, definitely obese. They've probably got chronic joint pain, all kinds of problems that sort of compound with that. And you just tell them, oh, but you're beautiful at any size, right? Well, no, you're not. And also, you've got health issues. So why don't we just be honest about that sort of stuff? But you seem to get that a lot more with women than you do guys. Guys will just be honest. They'll just say, you know, I'll, I'll be with one of the boys like we were at Breckenridge last year, and they'll be standing there with their shirt off. It's like, what the hell is this, man? You're skinny fat, like you're shaped like a pear. Fix this.
Yeah,
You can't be
tighten up.
hanging around us looking like that, right? And
Right.
it's like, the guy will take it to heart to be like, yeah, you're right. I'll fix that. But we as men end up being direct and honest. Like I think that's certainly one of the big distinguishing differences between men and women as far as the way that we approach stories and the novelty of these sorts of conversations. And I think that maybe we take that for granted sometimes as guys, whereas you do the ladies night show and you watch them sort of like do their thing and you're like, oh, there it is again, right? Oh, there it is again.
Well, it's always about competition between women. I mean, there's really not this the reason that we know why women aren't honest with another because it's all about intersexual competition is they want to compete with the top shelf guys. So if they can get women to continue to be ugly or be fat or look old, but try to convince them that they're skinny and young and attractive, then there's no work that goes into that. There's no need to change.
I saw something
And
on Twitter today where they were talking about short hair. Did you see it?
I
There was a
did.
study done on hairdressers, and female hairdressers are more likely to encourage a woman to cut her hair short if she's beautiful to try to disqualify her from the sexual marketplace, because we know that men find long hair feminine, more attractive, a sign of youthfulness and fertility. But female hairdressers will encourage beautiful women to cut their hair short to try to disqualify them. I found that fascinating,
Yeah, I didn't.
which is
I
right in
saw
line with
who
what you're talking
posted
about
that.
right there.
Right. I mean, and it's they hold a lot of power because look, man, you. I don't know if you guys have seen chicks get haircuts, but it's always funny when a girl gets a haircut and she gets like an inch or two cut off, and you're like, you don't know any difference. But to them, it's you might as well
It's
have given her a
huge.
buzz cut. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, 6, 7 inches, 8 inches of hair is years of hair growth, and so but this idea, it's all about competition. But somebody, I made that comment, I think once on X, and somebody said, well, what about, men? Like, aren't men always competing with women? I said, yes, but the difference is that it's a, it's like a necessary evil. Men will go further when they have a tribe of strong, masculine, competent men. And it's important to have that for the advancement of tribes and society. So, because a lot of guys say, "Oh, well, why are you guys? Aren't you guys happy with 80% of men being dorks and losers? Like, wouldn't you rather just tell men to get fat and not chase excellence?" It's like, well, no, because there's it's a net positive when you have strong, virtuous, masculine
Tides
men that are
raise all ships, right?
correct. So as you're advancing society, where there's never that necessity for women because good luck pitting a female tribe against a male tribe. I mean, we already know how that's played out for millennia.
Mm.
So they really only have competition in girl world where it breaks each other down, and it's far more bloodthirsty than it is in the male world. figuratively speaking, but at least when it comes to guys competing, competition creates stronger men, which creates a better society. Competition for women is all about just getting the next best guy so she can be taken care of. It's very solipsistic when you talk about female competition. It's all about her hypergamy. Male competition is about building tribes and advancing society forward. So, you
Mm.
know, we see that as a net positive, even though we're building up men who could one day, you know, dethrone us or overtake us, essentially.
Yeah, I got another note here on SSRIs, antidepressants, therapy, and baggage. And one of the things I noticed was that the younger the woman is, the it's interesting because it's like a bell curve. The younger she is, the less baggage she's got. At some point, there's like a middle point where it's like they've been carrying baggage around for quite a while, late 30, like late 20s, maybe 30s, in some cases. And then at some point, then they deal with it when they're past their prime and they're in their 40s and 50s, where they don't tend to sort of carry that baggage around so much. Did you notice that trend with a couple of the gals? There's a few that were very, very like distraught during the conversations, and they were talking about therapy and SSRIs and antidepressants and stuff like that they were on.
Yeah, I found that particularly interesting because statistically, the women that are most likely to be on antidepressants and SSRIs are white single women that are 40 plus,
Yeah.
not your late 20s, early 30s.
But we had a
So
few in the late 20s that were on antidepressants.
we did. And I think so. I think they're kind of reaching that critical mass, whether you want to call it the biological clock, or if you want to call it the epiphany phase, whether you want to call it the wall, it doesn't really matter what you want to call it. I think a lot of the women in their 40s and 50s sort of resigned to their plight, and they kind of just said, hey, this is how it's going to be, and they kind of rationalize it in a way so they don't have to go through that. But I don't want to say maybe they've given up hope, but they seem to be much more comfortable with reality and knowing and being more self-aware, um, because I think they've had enough time and experience in the real world where they no longer get that attention. The guys they want are not going after them anymore, and so it becomes a very sobering reality. Whereas the women in their late 20s, early 30s are doing everything they can to claw back to when they were 22, 23, and keep those feelings. And so they're unable to reconcile the fact that they are on borrowed time and that the sands in the hourglass are spilling rapidly.
Mm.
And so they're not quite ready to embrace and accept. Um, and I think it's probably also a generational thing as well. I mean, even last week or 2 weeks ago, I mean, the first thing those, I mean, the 2 21-year-olds we had on, we're talking about therapy, right? And it's just
Yes.
such a mainstream thing now. I mean, you have major podcast platforms that are sponsored by like telehealth therapy companies.
BetterHelp
So,
or yeah, something like
exactly.
that.
Yeah. So, it is incredibly mainstream. It is, very Gen Z and very millennial focused. I don't think that it permeated Gen X as much as it has the younger generations. So, yeah, it's definitely interesting. I thought most of the time, like when we had 40-year-old, 50-year-old women on, they were rather well adjusted, even though they may be single moms or they may be um, going through a divorce or separated. They still tended to be a little more, head on their shoulders than a lot of the younger chicks.
I think it's because they at some point come to the realization that the expiry date on their beauty is a lot closer than what they had anticipated in the past. Like we had Martha Bueno was her name or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I don't know if you remember her with the
Oh, I remember Martha.
she had the she had the she had the sign above her
She had
head.
the neon sign, yeah,
Yeah,
Bueno or
here
something
it
like
is.
that.
Yeah. Latin
Martha
Latin Boss
Bueno.
Babe was the title of that one.
See, people
And
break my balls over my neon sign, but at least mine doesn't say moth in the background. Like,
yeah.
I mean, give me a break.
Yeah, she was interesting because, she was in her 40s and she wanted to argue that she was just as valuable and just as attractive today in the sexual marketplace as she was when she was in her early 20s. And we did a poll on the community tab and had thousands and thousands of responses. And I just, because we met her on Twitter, and I just took one of her earlier photographs, which she posted in her timeline, and the argument that she wanted to kick up with us of her when she was like 20 or something like that versus her today. And uniformly, unanimously across the board, everybody thought she looked better younger. And it's like at some point, I think, women come to, or they arrive at this place where they're like, yeah, I probably was a lot more beautiful when I was 23, and me not being as beautiful and having baggage is probably costing me. And then that's when they're willing to put down the baggage and walk away from it. You guys let me know what you think, if that, meets your own experiences, throw it in the comments. But I think that, the notion of baggage, and I mean, like, even the SSRIs, like, I was actually surprised how open and willing some of these gals were to admit that they're on antidepressants. I mean, your ex-girlfriend was on antidepressants. Like, you did an entire show
Oh yeah.
on sort of like what led you up on office hours to, getting red pilled and finding all this stuff and, connecting with me. And it's like, the stories you were telling about, the ups and downs, and you pop, these pills in the morning and these pills at night, and the sleep patterns and like the sexual function and the desire and the weight goes, like, it throws everything off for women. It's really not a good place to be. And like, the willingness to say, I mean, they're not saying, hey, I'm fucked, but they're basically saying, hey, I'm admitting that I'm on these things. But it kind of numbs them, doesn't it? Like it sort of makes them like these gray blobs of nothingness, right? Where they don't
Yeah.
have any polarity. It's just, they're just, they just are, and they don't care.
Well, what's interesting is that I think the reason that they're so forthcoming about it is because it's not taboo anymore. It's mainstream, it's acceptable, it's celebrated, and it's funny to be a chick that's messed up in the head. I mean, you've got I had a conversation with my girl maybe a week ago where she used to listen to that Call Her Daddy podcast, and then not very seriously. I think she
Yeah.
just listened to it, but they used to sell merchandise, and like on the shirts, it said something like, "I'm unwell," right? And it's funny. It's like, "Oh, I'm so messed up. Oh, I'm so quirky. My life is a joke." Like, ha ha ha. And I was like, think about the message that you're putting out into the world. Like, think about when you put something on a shirt and you're going to wear that in public, what you're sending to people, right? And you might just say, oh, you're just being a hard ass. It's just a funny little thing. But the stories we tell ourselves are real. The things we choose to broadcast as signals and messages to other people and strangers are absolutely real. And so if you're not careful, you become numb to those signals and they become a part of your everyday reality. And
Mm.
so, always tired, always depressed, always my life is in a tailspin. Ha ha ha, my life is such a train wreck. And you start to embody some of those traits and carry that stuff around. And it's almost like it's like a badge of honor, or it makes them want, like, almost like it's almost like an in-group thing. It's, well, if nothing else, I'm super alone, but at least there's a million other women out there that are as screwed up as me, so it makes me feel a little bit better about myself because at
Yeah.
least I'm not the only one. So, yeah, the SSRIs and the drugs and all of that sort of stuff is just, it's become, at this point, it's celebrated. It's go to therapy and get on drugs. I mean, it's yeah, it's really sickening.
It's um it's almost like women celebrate SSRIs like men celebrate TRT.
Yeah.
Only TRT has a much more positive effect on men than SSRIs do on women. I really hope you guys enjoyed that clip. If you want to watch the full length podcast, you can find that over here, that clip's from. If you're newer to the channel, make sure you hit subscribe over here, and pin down below in the top comment, you'll find a bunch of useful links to my website, my supplement line, books, and a bunch of other stuff. Have an amazing day. Peace out.